Every narcissist believes they are the one who decides when the story ends. They even script their own breakups, the timing, the reason, and sometimes even your lines. They need to be seen as the one in control, the one who cuts the cord when bored to preserve the illusion of superiority. But there is one kind of ending that drives them insane. When you force them to discard you, when they have to push you away, not because they want to, but because they can't bear the fact that you've seen the truth. It begins quietly. No arguments, no drama, only you. Once easily swayed by emotion, becoming still. You start asking questions. You stop rushing to believe every word they say. You're no longer afraid of their silence. You observe, you listen, and you notice strange gaps between their pretty words, contradictions you once explained away. But now you don't explain anymore. You simply ask, softly but precisely enough to make them uneasy. You said you were there last night, but then what's this message? Who did you tell that story to? How did they know before me? Those small questions are enough to make the mask crack, because what a narcissist fears most isn't truth itself, but being caught lying. When they feel the light of awareness shining into their shadows, they react not like someone being asked, but like someone being cornered. They'll lash out, play the victim, or attack you instead. You're so controlling. I can't believe you doubt me. Are you trying to manipulate me now? All to deflect the light away from themselves. And when you no longer fall for the emotional bait, when you simply watch in silence, no defense, no explanation, they begin to suffocate. You are no longer in the script. You don't yell, don't cry, don't apologize. You simply stand in truth, and that is unbearable for them. A narcissist can handle contempt, but not clarity. That's when they begin to push you out. Not because they want to, but because your presence becomes a mirror. Every word you speak, every look you give reflects what they hate most themselves. They must make you the problem to escape that reflection. So they cast you out, rewriting the script. I'm the one who ended it. They'll tell others you're crazy, unfaithful, cruel, anything to preserve the illusion of control. But deep down they know you forced their retreat. What breaks them isn't losing you, it's being seen by you and having no control over your reaction. You don't scream, you don't play their game, you don't try to prove your innocence. You remain calm, and in that calm, their entire illusion trembles. Jung once said, "We do not possess our shadow until someone sees it." When you become the one who sees their shadow without fear, you force them to confront what they've always run from. That's why they have to leave, not because you're weak, but because you've become too strong. Every narcissist lives by an unspoken law: control or die. It isn't a need to be loved, but a need to dictate how others love them. They don't seek connection, they seek dependency. Every relationship to them is a closed loop, a ritual they repeat obsessively. Seduce, possess, devalue, discard, and return. That cycle isn't random, it's their heartbeat. The first phase is seduction. They choose you not because you're weak, but because you have what they lack: light, goodness, truth. They enter your life as a refined reflection of you. They observe, imitate, and mirror every emotional nuance until you believe, finally, someone understands me. But they aren't loving you, they're studying you. Every compliment is a hook, every act of affection a test to measure your reaction when they take it away. Once they've mapped your emotional terrain, they move to possession. Here, love turns into leverage. They make you believe you owe them, that your happiness depends on them. They praise you only to belittle you moments later. They demand proof of love through silence, submission, or sacrifice. And when you comply, they smile not out of affection, but triumph. They've found your control switch. Then comes devaluation. The colors fade. The person who once called you one of a kind now calls you too sensitive. The one who admired your mind now says, "You overthink everything." They start playing push-pull when you distance yourself. They become tender. When you draw near, they turn cold. You spiral into confusion and self-blame, believing if you just try harder, things will go back to how they were. But there is no before. There is only the tactic. Finally comes the discard. But here's the truth. Their discard is never real. It's simply a new manipulation, a test to see if you're still under control. They might go silent, disappear, or act bored, but behind it lies a psychological measurement. Will you react? Will you text them, beg, prove? If you do, the game continues. They always think they hold the script, that they can vanish, make you unravel, and return at will, as if your life is a stage they direct. They believe your pain is proof of their power. They believe that when they leave, you'll fall apart. But then one day, something they never planned happens. You don't fall apart. You don't beg. You don't explain. You don't chase. You simply stop. No reaction. No hatred. Just silence, calm, terrifying silence. To them, that isn't peace, it's collapse. Because a narcissist's power was never in leaving it, was in being pursued. When you stop pursuing, their entire empire cracks. They lose their audience, their supply, their proof of existence. And in that stillness, panic sets in. They'll try everything to pull you back, playing the victim, feigning remorse, rekindling nostalgia, even provoking chaos just to make you look again. But this time you see clearly. You see that their power was never strength, only fragility wrapped in performance. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And in your stillness, they are forced to see their own darkness reflected in your eyes, the one thing they fear most. The discard that truly destroys them isn't when you leave, it's when you wake up. When you no longer crave validation, apologies, or understanding. When you realize that leaving isn't failure, it's freedom. When you understand that your peace is worth more than any explanation. That is the fatal blow, not of anger, but of sovereignty. But understand this. The discard, whether you initiated it or forced them to, is never the end. For a narcissist, ending doesn't exist, because they don't leave to move on. They leave to return from another angle. They are emotional parasites, and like all organisms that live off a host, when separated from their source of energy, their first instinct is to find a way back. They return not out of love, but out of a power paradox. In their distorted psyche, your silence isn't just distance, it's defiance. Your calm awakens their deepest fear, that they no longer matter, that they've become invisible. And to a narcissist, invisibility equals non-existence. To not be seen is, for them, a kind of death. So begins the cycle of return. It usually starts subtly, a harmless message, a polite question, a casual like on social media, or a mutual friend suddenly mentioning their name. Nothing obvious, just gentle taps like small hooks cast into the dark, waiting to see if you'll bite. If you respond even with a simple yes, they've already won. A narcissist doesn't need your love, they just need your reaction. Because reaction means connection still exists. They don't measure worth by affection, but by influence. And if they can make you reply, even out of politeness, they feel the old energetic cord is still alive. They have something to cling to again. Then, from that small signal, they escalate. They might disappear and reappear, send an emotional message or feign vulnerability. I miss you. I just wanted to hear your voice. I'm going through such a rough time. You're the only one who understands me. Every word is calculated to awaken the empathy they once used to control you. They know exactly where that weakness lies because they built it themselves, brick by brick, with false affection. Carl Jung once wrote, "What we do not make conscious appears in our lives as fate." And for the narcissist, what remains unconscious is their terror of abandonment. That's why they keep reenacting the same script with everyone to control an ending they cannot face. When you leave, you force them to touch that void, and it drives them mad. This is when they enter the hoovering phase, named after the Hoover vacuum cleaner, a perfect metaphor. Because that's exactly what they're doing, trying to suck you back in. Through sweetness, despair, or guilt. They may cry, beg, promise to change, or craft new tragedies. I'm sick. I lost my job. Someone's trying to ruin me. The goal isn't reconciliation, it's reopening the energy line. When you reply, They don't feel relief because they've been forgiven. They feel relief because they still exist in you. And once they sense that, the cycle starts again, only this time they're smarter, colder, more dangerous. They know you're capable of leaving now, so they'll focus on making you doubt that decision. They'll say things like, "You misunderstood. I was just hurt. No one will ever love you like I do, or worse. You've changed. You're not the person I used to know." These aren't accusations, they're tactics meant to destabilize you, to make you wonder if you've become too harsh, too distant. They don't want you back out of love, they want you back so they can end it their way. When an empath doesn't understand this, they're easily pulled back in by their own goodness. They believe everyone can change. They believe that one more chance might make things right. But to a narcissist, a second chance is just an opportunity to reinstall their power. Once you step through that door again, you become the puppet in the same old play, only this time you think you're the director. The truth is, they don't come back for you. They come back for themselves. The image of themselves reflected in your eyes once made them feel real. When you withdraw that gaze, their sense of self collapses. And because they have no true inner core, they'll do anything to reclaim that mirror, even for a fleeting moment. If you don't respond, they shift from seduction to destruction. They'll attack your image, smear your name, twist stories, and paint you as the villain. This isn't just to humiliate you, it's to preserve the illusion that they still control the narrative. If they can make others hate you, they feel they've won, because to them everything is a power game. They'll create new scripts, calling you crazy, selfish, disloyal, cold. But never forget, slander is the narcissist's confession. When they lie about you, they're describing themselves. They project their darkness onto you so they don't have to face it. So when you hear them speak about you with moral superiority, don't react. Every reaction you give reinforces their story. Your indifference isn't weakness, it's a power cut. When you stay silent, they lose direction. Because in their mind, every story requires an audience. When you stop answering, the only echo left is inside their own head. Indifference is poison to a narcissist because it generates no energy. Anger, arguments, hatred, even compassion, all are energy sources they can feed on, but indifference is nothingness. It drops them into emotional zero gravity, leaving them with nothing to hold on to. You might think indifference feels cruel, but in truth, indifference is conscious compassion. Because if you still react, you're helping them sustain their illusion. When you're silent, you force them to face the emptiness they've been running from. You're not punishing, you're reflecting. And nothing terrifies them more than seeing themselves without the mirror that once softened their reflection. On a spiritual level, this is the nigredo phase in Jung's alchemy, the black stage, where everything decays before rebirth. For you, it's the dissolution of illusion. For them, it's the collapse of the ego. You are purifying your soul, while they rot inside the darkness they created. They might rush into a new relationship, don't be fooled. The new supply is only morphine for their soul, a temporary anesthetic to avoid feeling the void. But soon enough, the old cycle repeats. Idealize, devalue, discard. The addiction to control has no cure. As for you, if you're truly awake, you'll see this clearly. Their return isn't fate, it's the final test. Not to prove your strength, but to show you how healed you truly are. If you still waver, still crave validation, still wait for an apology, they still have power. But if you simply smile, no anger, no longing, just understanding, their power dissolves. That is the energy of indifference. It isn't loud, it isn't triumphant, it's absolute stillness. When you reach that state, the narcissist can no longer enter. They can talk, act, scream, cry, but you exist on a higher plane. You're no longer in their game. You've stepped off the board. Carl Jung once said, "Wholeness is not achieved by running away from the darkness, but by learning not to be swallowed by it." When you hold that conscious indifference, you no longer need to prove you've won. You simply know you're no longer being pulled into that realm. From this point on, whenever they return, you don't have to play a role. You don't have to block every path. You simply don't open the door. And slowly, they'll vanish not because you pushed them away, but because there's no oxygen left for them here. That is the true end of a discard. Not when someone leaves, but when the power game ends because you've stopped playing. No more reactions, no more explanations, no more attempts to understand. Only peace. A peace they'll never comprehend, but you will know it well. Freedom. When all manipulative games fail, when every message goes unanswered, when every accidental encounter falls flat, when your silence lasts long enough to pierce the illusion they built, what collapses is no longer the relationship, but the belief system the narcissist built around themselves. Outwardly, they may look fine posting pictures, smiling, keeping busy, but inside, a fracture forms that can't be mended. For the first time in their life, they feel truly alone with themselves. When you're no longer the main audience, the narcissist falls into a state of false egolessness. The persona they built from others' reactions begins to dissolve. They no longer know who they are, what they want, or which mirror to use to see a familiar reflection. Jung called this the death of the persona. But for ordinary people, that death opens the door to rebirth. For the narcissist, it leads only to existential panic. At first comes denial. They tell themselves you're just angry, that you'll come back, that no one else will ever understand them like you did. They try to replicate you, your words, your habits, even find someone who looks like you, but everything slips through their fingers. The new relationship doesn't give them the same feeling of being seen, because no one mirrors them as deeply as you once did. What they call new love is merely the shadow of a memory. Goodbye. Then comes the collapse in silence. When every attempt to reconstruct their self-image fails, they fall into a terrifying stillness. The same silence they once used to punish others now turns and imprisons them. There's no one left to gaslight, no one to mirror them, no one to blame. Your silence becomes a spiritual mirror reflecting them back to themselves, and in it they see only emptiness. When there's no one left to manipulate, that manipulative energy turns inward. They begin to gaslight themselves. One voice in their head keeps whispering, "You're not at fault. Other people are too weak." While another quieter asks, "Then why does everyone leave?" That inner dialogue becomes a battlefield. They want to preserve the illusion of power, but reality hits them day after day. Those who once believed them are now silent. Friends are drifting away, and the new supply runs dry quickly, because no one can endure their bottomless hunger. This is where spiritual collapse begins. With nothing left to reflect, their inflated I starts to shrink and contort. Like a star that has burned through its fuel, they implode under their own weight and become a black hole pulling everything in and still unable to fill the void at the center. Outwardly, they'll say they're changing, learning a new way to live, but in truth, they're just performing a healed persona to see whether a new role can attract new supply. When those roles stop working, they drop into true nigredo, the pitch-black stage Jung describes in Spiritual Alchemy. For a person on the path of awakening, nigredo is the beginning of transformation, the necessary dissolution that precedes rebirth. But for the narcissist, nigredo doesn't lead to renewal, it becomes a sealed hell. Because they refuse pain, refuse to look at the cause, refuse to admit the shadow is theirs. They fight it, and that fight traps them in an endless loop of suffering. At this point, you are no longer a character in their story. You become a legend in their mind. They'll never say it out loud, but they think about you more than ever. Not out of love, but because you're the only one who broke the cycle they control. You are the failure they cannot accept. And in a narcissist's psychology, that failure is a wound of the soul, hidden beneath every illusion, but still bleeding. You may see them doing fine, yet the truth is they are dying loudly. They need noise, lights, attention to fill an inner silence. But the more chaos they create, the more they feel the hollowness. This is where many narcissists slide into addictions, extreme appetites, or refined self-destruction. When manipulative energy can no longer move outward, it turns and devours them from within. As for you, the one who left you, no longer look at them with anger or pity, only with pure awareness. You see the price they pay for living apart from truth. They are not punished by you. They punish themselves with their own illusion. The harder they hold the mask, the more it hurts, because beneath the glossy paint lies rot. Carl Jung once said, "What we reject within ourselves becomes our fate." For the narcissist, that fate is isolation. No one abandons them forever. They push everyone away. And when there's no one left to blame, they begin to blame themselves, then deny it, then blame again, a mad circle with no exit. This is spiritual collapse when the soul has nowhere to hide, cannot run, cannot be worshipped. Some narcissists at this stage turn to religion, therapy, or meditation, but often only to resurrect the mask, not the soul. They learn the language of healing without its spirit. They talk about energy, the universe, awakening, but it's just a fresh coat of paint on the same old wall. And within that contradiction, they wither, because the universe obeys a law of balance. Anything built on illusion dissolves when the light of truth appears. You don't need to do anything. Just live truthfully, peacefully, and keep growing. Every clear step you take becomes a shard of mirror, forcing them to see what they refuse. Every calm breath is an invisible reminder that power is not control, it is freedom. Someday, when every illusion has collapsed, they will face the truth they fear most. No one destroyed them. They did it themselves. They chose deceit over honesty, control over love, pride over repair. And when the final mask falls, they won't find you, only the void. A void that, if they dared to enter, could become rebirth. Most never do. You who walked through that fire have learned what they never will. Silence is not loss, it is birth. In silence, your soul is made new. You no longer need anyone to mirror you, because you have become the light that mirrors itself. You don't need to prove who's right or wrong, because truth reveals itself in how you live. Their collapse is no longer your concern. It is simply proof that spiritual cause and effect works perfectly. Every lie they sowed returns as an echo in an empty room. Every person they hurt becomes a mirror reflecting the darkness they cannot escape. You don't need to watch them fall to feel justice. Once you're no longer entangled, you've stepped beyond the theater of tragedy. You have entered a brighter tier of the journey. And there, the only thing that matters isn't victory, it's awareness. Awareness that all true power begins with withdrawing your energy from what is unworthy. That real love is not submission, but reverence for the life within you. And that sometimes refusing to return isn't coldness, it is the deepest mercy for two souls, the one who has learned and the one still trapped in shadow. Because in the end, you didn't abandon anyone. You left a place where there was no light, and in doing so, you became a light they cannot bear. One day, you'll stop thinking of them as the person who hurt you and start seeing them as a phase, necessary, intense, but complete. You no longer ask why it happened, because you'll understand. Some souls enter our lives only to awaken the parts of us we've forgotten. The narcissist was never fate, but a spiritual test, to see if you would choose yourself when love turned into control, to see if you were brave enough to walk away from illusion even while your heart was still bleeding. The true discard doesn't happen when they leave you, but when you are no longer there to be left. When you step out of the loop of tragedy without carrying resentment, you've already won, not because they lost, but because the cycle of power has dissolved. They will still find someone new, still replay the same script, but this time you're no longer in the audience, and that is freedom. Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no awakening without the dark night of the soul. You have walked through that night not to punish anyone, but to meet yourself again. You now know that true love needs no proof, that indifference isn't cruelty, but the highest form of emotional intelligence. You are silent not out of pride, but because peace has become the only language you wish to speak." When you reach that state, you no longer need victory, apology, or understanding, because you already understand. You see clearly that every manipulation, every lie, every betrayal was a mirror reflecting back the one thing that can never be taken from you, the worth of a free soul. And in that freedom, You become something the narcissist can never touch, a real human being. No longer the savior, the sufferer, or the one who has to prove anything. Just yourself, calm, lucid, and untouchable. This isn't an ending, it's a rebirth. Because after all the pain, you don't become someone else. You return to yourself deeper, brighter, and beyond reach. Remember this: they were never left behind by you. They were abandoned by themselves. And you, at last, have only just begun a new journey. The journey of someone who knows that silence too can be a form of love.